Hello and welcome to the Clark Art Talks. I'm Kendra Larson. I'm the Archer Gallery Director and Clark Art Talks Coordinator. Today we are lucky to have the illustrator and comic book artist Ryan Alexander Tanner joining us. Ryan Alexander Tanner is an illustrator and comics artist. He collaborates with individuals and organizations to adapt specialized content into illustrated narratives that are accessible and appealing to a broad audience. Clients have included the Portland Mercury, Dave's Killer Bread, and the TV series Portlandia. I also consider him a friend, and I think this will be a really fun talk about his journey as an illustrator. And let's welcome Ryan Alexander Tanner.
Stop for that. All right, you always start with a joke that one person laughs at. It's always a good way to start your talk. My name is Ryan Alexander Tanner. I got a hyphenated last name because my mom is a feminist, and it's made it hard to fill out forms my whole life, but it's worth it. I'm going to talk about my career. I'm doing another talk in a week at the Comics Museum, and I sort of realized like I'm middle-aged now, so I know one laughs at my jokes. And I'm in the middle of my career, so I'm sort of in this moment of kind of like, what did I do for all that time, you know? And despairing a little bit, but then you put a slideshow and you go, oh, I made some stuff. So anyway, I'll tell you about it. I had to go in my basement for this, but when I was in high school, I drew a comic strip for the school paper. I went to Berkeley High. We had like an actual printed newspaper that came out every 2 weeks, and I would just get to do a little comic strip each time. And I guess drawing and making comics, writing and drawing comics always kind of gave me like a sense of self, like of who I am. I think in high school, you're always like, what am I doing here? You know, or where do I fit in? And I think I didn't really fit in, but I had at least like this little island I lived on of being obsessed with comics and writing stories. And it was kind of my voice or my way of being in that community. And it was not really many people were doing it, but it just, I don't know. It was, and you know, in class I would not pay attention. I'd sit and draw on the margins and stuff, you know. And then I finished high school and I didn't go to college right away. My family was broke, so I was not very encouraged. I mean, encouraged to be educated, but the practical elements of that were a little elusive. So I worked at a video store for a year in Berkeley. VHS videotapes, remember those, you guys? Yeah. One customer, it was like a hip hop scratch DJ. And turned out he had been there like in Brooklyn at the start of hip hop. And he would put out these compilations. I had bought a compilation he had. And then I guess, I don't remember how it happened, but I asked him, or he asked me if I could do a CD cover for him. And this wasn't the first one I did, but it was one of the first ones I did. And then he gave me $50. And it was like the first time I got paid to make art. You know, I got $50. And it's a really cool compilation too. It's got Curtis Blow on it. It's got some cool stuff. I think it's 4 volumes. I still have these too in my basement. But that was kind of the moment. It was like, maybe you can create comics in exchange for money or illustrations, which I'm still trying to figure out. So then I ended up going to art school. I figured out I couldn't survive in the Bay Area because the short version is I could never afford it. And then I had a friend that went to Lewis and Clark, and I came to visit. I went to a house party, and I asked the guys whose house it was how much they were paying for rent, and then I moved to Portland. And then I applied to the local art school. I applied to PNCA, and I didn't realize that everyone who applied got in, so I was like, I got in. And then I kind of went at a weird moment where there wasn't really an illustration program. They were like phasing it out. So I ended up doing, it was called Intermedia. It was like combined discipline. And it was essentially like theory and practice. I went to art school. So I didn't know what else to do with myself. but also like I couldn't draw a car or I couldn't draw like a street and like figure out the perspective, I really struggled with that, and I figured they would teach me that. And they didn't really, other than like just look at it and draw and measure the angles. Like beginning life drawing was really, really impactful on me, just in terms of kind of the motion of drawing, the way that you move your hand and syncing your eye to your hand, that still is something I feel very deeply. But also like things I was really interested in and wouldn't have thought to pursue, which is like, who's your audience? What do you have to say? What are you, what's your voice and what's meaningful to you? And like, what do you want to do as an artist, So this was kind of a big moment for me in my beginning theory and practice class. I got really into portraiture, which was totally surprising to me because I didn't draw from life really at all until I went to art school, and then they made me do it, and I realized I really liked it. And then drawing is like documenting an interaction or an experience became really, really interesting to me. So we had a time-based art assignment. That's what this was. I don't know if what isn't time-based art, right? Because it takes time to make art. So you can kind of justify whatever. But I got really interested in, even before like working retail, all these quick interactions, but just like, who are the people you see every day and who do you interact with? And that was always interesting to me, in this little gem of a moment from an interaction. So I had this idea for my assignment, just everyone I kind of saw or interacted with in a week, or I do 10 a day, I think, for a week, and asked them all the same question. And the question was, what's wrong with you? And that was because I felt like at art school, that was like an unspoken prompt to every discussion. Rather than saying, how are you doing? You could just say, what's wrong with you? Because that was always the answer you got, I'm feeling so anxious. And then something just clicked. This was like, you have these moments where something just clicks, and this was one of them. It was cool too, like Michael Voyer at the movies, like I didn't know him. Some of these are people I didn't know, I was sitting across from someone at the library. Some of these people ended up being good friends of mine. It was a range of things, it was a mix of people I knew and was comfortable with, and people I was just like, Michael Voyer at the movies didn't know I was drawing him, it's just like, So anyway, and then I put these in the student show, and it got in, which was like a cool moment for me, And then a guy at Wieden & Kennedy saw them. And this was the start of like do you guys know Wieden & Kennedy? It's like an ad agency in Portland. They do all the Nike stuff. They're like a big deal in the advertising world. And this was kind of the start of a series of these for me where, I would tell, I was taking a design class, and I go, I got to meet this guy over at Wieden & Kennedy in an hour. And they go, Wieden & Kennedy, oh my God, what is that? Like, I wouldn't know what it was, which made it less scary, I guess. Anyway, they were putting together a program called the 12 program, which was like some sort of an expensive internship or something, I don't know. But the guy putting it together saw these, and he wanted to make a promo thing. So he asked me basically to come there and do the same thing, draw everyone there, and ask them all the same question, which wasn't what's wrong with you. It was something like, give me a piece of your wisdom or something. It was trying to extract a piece of wisdom from everybody. And it ended up being the promotional item for this school they were putting together. And I think that was my first like gig, I think. I'm pretty sure, as far as my memory works. And it's interesting to look at these. It's interesting too, like even things that aren't a portrait or aren't capturing, I don't know if you all feel this way, but when I look at things I drew a long time ago, I always kind of remember where I was or what was going on, the experience of making it. So that kind of comes back to me a little bit. But there's also just an approach to drawing in these that I'm just more automatic, more quick. These are really fun. I had a crow quill nib and a bottle of ink, and then all these little Bristol cards I would cut out. So I just bring like 10 or 15 with me, and I would just draw them real quick. And I don't know how I didn't smear them, but these are all like 5-10 minute drawings, and they were moving and stuff too. They weren't like, no one was sitting for me really. So it was also like really terrifying to do this, but whatever you can do to keep yourself from reacting or worrying too much about it, you do that when you get the opportunity. That's the big secret, I think, of having a career. Hey, can you do this? You say, yeah, I can do that. And if you're having imposter syndrome or whatever, then that's just normal. That never goes away. Like right now, if one of you guys were like, these drawings aren't very good, I'd be like, oh no, my life, like, so that vulnerability, I think if you ever lose that vulnerability, that's when you should start worrying about the quality of your work. Because if you're not self-critical and wondering and questioning all the time, then you're probably not looking at it the right way. So then by happenstance, I went to like a show or something, and I just happened to meet the music editor of the Willamette Week. And he was asking me, because I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing these comics and I'm interviewing people and doing nonfiction comics, And so he said something like, would you want to do album reviews? And I didn't know how I would do that, but I said I'd interview like local musicians and do features, and that worked out. So I did a handful of these. I don't remember, maybe half a dozen or something. And this was Willie Vlautin, is the singer of an alt country band called Richmond Fontaine. And I was always really interested in like having an experience, like you don't want to just like have someone sitting still for 6 panels and telling you something. Like, what are you doing? So he really liked going to the Portland Meadows, which is a horse track. I think it's gone now. But I just went with him, and it was just an experience I had. I went to the horse track with Willie Vlautin, and so it's sort of a portrait of him. And I feel like it captured his sort of essence in a way that was cool to me. And then I got a chance to pitch a feature. That was always my thing. This remains my thing of like, yeah, I'll do a thing, but can we do like a stable succession of things so I know how much money I'll be making or whatever? So I got to pitch a feature, and I think it got reformatted into this. This is how these things work, is you go, okay, so Kirk Reeves is no longer with us, unfortunately, but he used to sit mostly or often across the street from Powell's and play the trumpet with the Mickey Mouse hat. And I always kind of loved him and felt like something soothing about his presence or something, So for my initial pitch, I went up to him and I said, what's the secret to happiness? I just felt like maybe he would know. And he was always like, what? Whenever I would ask him stuff, and he said, I just play my music and I hope I make people happy. And I love that still. Like, I think he was right. So then you go in and then they go, can it be like a Polaroid, or can we have like a description on the bot? You got to like workshop it with editors. So it became it was like a drawing of a Polaroid with contextual information on the written part. And I did it for about a year, and it was a little, I don't know. It was fun. It was good when it was good, and probably not when it wasn't. And I never really understood like who is the audience at the Willamette Week. I still don't know who reads the Willamette Week, or like what are you trying to. I had a kind of struggle with editorial. Like they also started having me like interview kind of like D-list celebrities and stuff, and they would want me to antagonize them, and that was weird. And then also just like the amount of context I had to put on the bottom got more and more elaborate, which I felt like kind of really bogged. I started having to write the date and time, but it was like, who is this and where are they and what did you talk with them about, all in one panel. It was just kind of cumbersome. I don't know. And there was a lot of turnover above me. So I don't know. It was a cool experience though. Sometimes you'd land on cool stuff. Ethan and Alex Museum. I was riding my bike and these kids had like a wagon full of spiders in a jar and Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and it was Ethan and Alex Museum. I love that one. But so I stopped doing it after a while. I don't know. I did it for about a year or so. And I don't know. I don't know if I would have arrived at something else if I'd stuck with it. Who knows? And then the last feature I ever did with the Willamette Week was sort of a fraught experience, but they sent me with an intern to the farmer's market to interview farmers market vendors. And I met Dave Dahl, Killer Dave. And Dave's Killer Bread was a new thing then. It was like in 4 new seasons or something. But I actually heard of it. I had a roommate, and I always remember him coming home and being like, look at this bread. It's called Dave's Killer Bread, and it's got a guy playing guitar. This was the old logo. It was just a photo of him. And And I swear that this is true, but I was working on, I think I took it out of this for time, but I was doing a gallery show about prison. It was a fictional correspondence between fake me and someone in prison. And I was like going home, and then I said, I should ask that guy about, because Killer Day was in prison a lot. And that was part of his story, was like, I got out of prison and I started this bread company. So then I walked back over and I said, hey, can I interview you about prison? I was like, research is a big part of all this stuff too. I'll talk more about research, but and I always like to just talk with people who've had experiences as research. That to me is just more engaging and more, I don't know, illuminating or something. So I said, yeah, can I talk to you about prison? And he said, yeah, I think I might have something to talk to you about too. So I met up with him, and he was just like, oh man, I gotta get this logo done. This logo for my bread. They wanted to make it an illustration. And there's actually like 2 or 3 guys that like flaked on that gig. There was like a bunch of drafts that they had when I showed up. But so he basically wanted this, but illustrated. And I just did these quickly, like, and sent it to him in an email. Like, here's kind of what I would do with it. And he said, you got the job. And so, I don't know, he paid me like $500 to draw this logo. And it went through like a zillion drafts. I'll show you. I don't know if this is the original, but when I drew it, I got the face wrong, like his mustache and stuff. And so the original ink drawing of the logo, I don't know if that's it or if that's one of the variations, but it doesn't look right. And then I just drew his face like 30 times and kept photoshopping it on, and he would like come to my apartment. It was burned in my memory, but he would like look in the mirror and like turn around real fast to like show me the face, you know? And then I finally got it, and that is the Dave's Killer Bread logo, which was 2006 or 7 maybe that got drawn. And it was just a farmer's market booth. Like, you get these gigs all the time, you know, someone's got like a couple $100 and they want you to do their thing. So one thing I'll say about all of your upcoming careers is you do not know what's going to be the thing. I didn't go, oh, this is going to be the thing, or I don't even necessarily want this to be the thing, but I don't have a problem with it. It's good bread, you know, I don't have an issue with it at all. It's done right by me. But you just make a lot of stuff, and I don't know what's going to hit or what's going to resonate or have a life, so you just keep making stuff, you know, and you do it because you have to, or it's inside of you or whatever, but who knows what will happen. And there was more stuff early on that's long gone, like they had this really crappy looking Good Seed logo, and I said, and then they're like, it's sort of like religious iconography, and I was like, oh, what if they're like in Buddha poses? So they have halos, but also Buddha poses, it's more non-denominational. And there used to be like little cartoon characters on all the breads, and that got focus grouped away when it became a national company. People were like, why are there little seed people on these? So that was too bad. But yeah, and so I stuck with them for a while, and they did right by me. It was owned by 3 people when I got involved, and it was good. It was really good thing that happened for me. And then I did a ton of stuff, you know, with the Rose City Rollers. They had a project they wanted to do, fictionalized stories of real people. They just were like, yeah, we got free printing from this printer, and we want to make these comic books. And they got me and a few other artists. There's 4 teams, so each team had their own artist. And then I have kind of a long history of this, where I came in and the project was like a mess, and it wasn't going to get done. And so I sort of like, I try not to like take over, like to be really respectful of what people want to do, but if something's not going to get done, if I'm not kind of going, we need to get this done, it needs to be done by this time, that's been a role I have not wanted to take on, but I've sort of ended up being that person on a lot of projects. This was a really fun one. I remember always like sitting with Psychotica and going like, so what's in your house, you know? And she go, oh, the guy from can't remember, some horror movie, and she wanted a straight jacket on the coat hanger and a bear with a saddle rug, and that's all stuff that she described, you know, like that would be my cartoon me's house. And I love stuff like that, just like talking with people and getting the sense of like what their deal is, or what, because that's the thing too about comics that's crazy is it's visual storytelling, right? So it's got to make sense. It's got to be clear. And then you're like a costumer, and you're directing actors, and you're a set dresser, and those things are very challenging, especially when it's like people that think differently than you, or it's not intuitively the type of characters you would, I got a little more historical stuff coming up, and that is a very daunting piece, and I feel like people don't talk about that enough, like the amount of research or just thinking that needs to go into those things. And then I'm skipping around, we're moving steadily forward in time, but I got like an audition basically for a book. And it was Teachers College Press. It's Columbia University's academic press. And they had a book called To Teach, which is a teacher's ed book that's done really well. And I think it had been out for 10 years at that point. I believe it was 10 years. And this is actually true. Bill Ayers wrote the book. And he went to a meeting and he said, oh, what about doing a comic book? They were doing a second edition. And they said, what about doing a comic book? And he didn't want to. So he said, I'll only do it. Or no, they said they wanted a second edition and he didn't want to do it. And then he said, I'll only do it if we can do it as a comic book. And he said that so that they would leave him alone. And then they came back and were like, well, let's do the comic book. And he's like, oh, what do I do now? And I had met him. His brother was my high school English teacher, was the simplest version of how we knew each other. And I had all this stuff I had done. They're like looking for a comics artist. So it basically got me an audition. And so he flew me out to Chicago where he lived, and we put this pitch together, which was essentially just like a roughly drawn version of the first chapter, and we had to kind of figure out what's the structure of this. It was tricky because it wasn't a narrative. It wasn't a book that was like, I was born in this year, and then I did this, and then it's like a bunch of concepts about teaching. It's not about anyone. It's like jumps around and tells different stories, and it's really the purpose is just to like get student teachers in a mindset around teaching. So we had to really figure out, like, how do you recreate this as a comic book, And we kind of came up with this idea of this sort of backbone of Bill, his first year as a kindergarten teacher, and then we kind of go in and out of the classroom. Like, we jump away to these scenarios and going in and out of that, which comics does very well. So anyway, and then they hired me to do it. But it wasn't very much money, that could be the title of this presentation. It wasn't very much money, so best of luck to all of you. And then Bill was like, oh, you can just come live at my house. And I was like, do I want to do that, But he actually, I'll tell you, if y'all are in your 20s, empty nesters are an exquisite resource. They have empty rooms in their home, and they miss having people there who are messy and irresponsible. And empty nesters really got me through my 20s in a big way. But yeah, he had this third floor that his sons had lived on, and then actually this long kind of series of people, including like Angela Davis, had lived on the third floor at some point because they were in school or they were transitioning from one thing to another or whatever. So it was actually like I joined this sort of community of people that lived on Bill Ayers' third floor. But yeah, I quit this was my quit your day job project. I was a security guard for 4 years after college, sorry. And did all the stuff I just showed you, plus a bunch of other stuff I didn't bother to show you. And then I was pretty exhausted, so it was actually cool to just like go live with surrogate parents and write a book for 6 months. And he had all these cool resources. I still love these, because it was like, what's the vibe of this? Like, how does this feel is something you think about early on. And he had these cool photos from the 70s, these black and white photos of early classrooms. And so I just did these really quick brush drawings. Even so, I don't really do this anymore, but I would just try to like really quickly draw what I was seeing. And it was more about like absorbing it in a way, So just stuff like coffee tins full of markers or cubby holes or sitting on the floor, or like you raise your hand and then your arm gets tired and you start doing this, you know, like just like the visual language of that space, you know. So I still love these drawings. These are all like 5-minute drawings or something. And I did, I should do this more. We had to design the kids in the classroom, right? So I did like a little height chart, keep track of them all. Those are the characters. And you should do that if you're doing a longer project. I always get annoyed at myself for not doing this because I don't do it enough. You should do turnarounds too. That's a whole other ball of wax. How are we doing on time? We're good. And then, I don't know, just a lot of things happened in that experience too, of like living with Bill. I mean, a lot of things, but a big part of it for me was kind of a deeper mode of collaboration. You know, I talked about those quick interactions and what you absorb from those. This was like a months-long interaction. And this book was really like this guy's philosophy towards teaching and in some ways towards life, you know? So it's in with me forever, just like sitting at a table with this guy and like talking informally about stuff too, you know, like hearing anecdotes or, you know, just what makes this person who they are, or even like their posture and their ways they express themselves, but translating that to the final thing too, you know. There's something that's hard to put into words about that, but I've collaborated best with people that I can do that with, where you really are like, who are you and who am I? And he modeled some things too, especially about being like an aging white man, you know, of like, he really listened to me. Like, I was very interested in what he had to say about teaching, and he was very interested in what I had to say about making comics. And he was like very open and very curious and inspired. And there was like a real exchange of energy that happened that, hold on to it when it happens. I mean, I don't know how collaborative y'all are in your work, but I've collaborated really well with some people and not so well with other people. And that is kind of a key ingredient, in my opinion. And then another thing happened that I'll tell you about briefly, which is that Bill Ayers is in the Weather Underground, which was in the 70s. They bombed a bunch of buildings and stuff in protest of the Vietnam War and in support of mostly the Black Panthers, but you know, anti-racist action against the government was a big part of who they were. And in the lead up to the 2008 election, when Obama got elected, it came out that Bill Ayers knew Obama. And it was a big scandal. It was one of the big election scandals. And this was all happening when I was living at his house. So this is not what I signed up for, but it was something I lived through. And I might make a book about that someday because I have a lot to say about it. But I think the main thing I would say, two things is, one is, yeah, actually the design of him is a little bit based on that arrest photo. That's like the time in his life we were trying to capture, like same age. One is, it was very interesting to me. Well, one is that having seen a big scandal really up close and really getting to know the person that was the subject of the scandal, nothing I ever saw on the news was really relevant or insightful about anything that was actually happening or relevant to this situation. And I would ask you all to maybe take that with you. Like, we have all these strong opinions about people we've never met or situations we don't actually know anything about. You know, I read headlines on Reddit on my phone and I go, that's bad, or that person's bad, you know. And obviously I have my political beliefs and those, you know, inform how I respond to things. But you don't know these people. You weren't there, you don't know the situation. So I don't know, like, just think about that more, please, because we all have so much stuff thrown at us all the time. It's like 10 times more now than it was in 2008. But nobody at any point was like, are these guys politically aligned? How well do they actually know each other? Do I care about this at all? Who is Bill Ayers? What's he doing now? Why did he do what he did in the first place? And what does that mean? And what does dissent mean and why? And where does it come? I don't know. These are important conversations that I never saw once through this whole thing. So it's just something to think about. And also, it's fascinating to me, it's true of Killer Dave too, that I made this little cartoon rendition of this person, and it was way more truthful and insightful than like this much more public representation of the person that went out there. And that's, I don't know what to do with that. I'm going to talk for another minute about this process because it was so interesting to me. And then I'll tell you about more stuff I did. I might have to start breezing through stuff a little bit. But so again, it wasn't a narrative. It was just a bunch of ideas. And so this is something I tried to figure out in college and didn't quite get there. But it kind of happened organically in this book. It was really helpful to have a deadline and to be like, if I don't get this done on time, I'm going to run out of money. That's like a very good motivator. Being poor is a good motivator for getting your work done. And so we would sit down, Bill was very available, and he didn't even understand what I was doing. He was like, you're just going to draw the book, right? And I was like, no, it doesn't work like that. And so I was actually like, we were probably at this for like 3 months before he really started to go like, oh, okay, I get what we're doing now. But anyway, I asked him to just write out like, what are the key concepts of the whole book and then of each chapter? Can you just write me out some bullet points? And he's like, oh, I can do that, yeah. So then you go, okay, chapter 3 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullet points. These are the things that we need you to know. You get to the end of that chapter, you learn these 6 things. That's what we need. And once you know that, you can dress it up however you want. You can do it in 2 pages or in 10 pages or whatever. And then you can just look at kind of the requirements we have. But we had 140 pages or something, so we need to make it fit in that space. But there's a great documentary, The 5 Obstructions. You guys know that one? They made us watch it in an art school, and I'm glad they did. And it's Lars von Trier goes back to his old mentor, and he makes him remake this like conceptual art film 5 times, and he gives him a different obstruction, which is like a creative constraint each time. And so you see how the same movie is made 5 times, but it's a completely different thing each time, but it's fundamentally the same thing. That was very impactful to me. And also, I mean, you do this now, like I'm a dad now, like I just read the potty training book, and you're like, this is really like 3 paragraphs worth of information, but it's a 200-page book, and I've actually done that for other parents. I made a poster of the bullet points, and I would just share that with them, because it's long because it's telling you over and over again, so you will learn it. But, really any like self-help book or, I'm reading The Anxious Generation right now, and it's the same thing. It's like, this is, you could bullet point, and that's what we all want, right? We just want the bullet point. But it's just reiterating it or supporting the arguments. But anywho, that was also very foundational to me. It was going like, okay, have an outline. What are we trying to say? And once you know that, now how do you make it engaging? How do you dress it up, And so then I would write, just outlines going, okay, we have, 7 pages or whatever. And so we're going to introduce this, we're going to introduce this concept, we're going to come back to it, yada, yada. And then I did like these thumbnails, this is an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. And I would just go, okay, I think like we'll have a sequence like this, and then we'll go to this and this. And then Bill was really good for free writes. I would show him those and I'd ask him to do free writes, and then he would just, all in these yellow legal pads. That was like a big part of this process, but he would just write a ton of stuff. And then another thing about comics is it's language of concision. So it's like, okay, you wrote 4 pages and now we maybe 30 words a panel tops and we have 4 panels. So learning how to say all that in fewer words was also like, and it was kind of the Willamette Week was helpful for that too. Just making it all fit. And that process of sitting down and go, oh, let's cross this out and this out and this out, and realizing it communicated as well was really illuminating for me also. Is it really 137? Okay, I gotta hurry up. Anyway, that's an example of his drawing of we have 1 page that's just the classroom and there's no words, So that's his drawing of it and my drawing of it. And at the end, we'll vote on which one was better. So then we had to draft the whole book like this. This is what we turned into the editor. And I felt very confident and strong. And then it came back like this. It says redo. I always show this to my students in my comics workshops because I understand the feelings that come up. And but in this case, we made these 2 pages 1 page. And I think it's better for it, And there's this thing of like text and image doing different things, Like the worst thing you can do in comics is draw something and then write text that tells you what you're looking at, show, don't tell. So we would have one concept in the language and then another in the image. Like in this case, the administrator is given this picture of a classroom, and the ideal classroom doesn't have any kids in it. And then nothing is drawn with a ruler in this book. It's all freehand with a brush, and then that uses the ruler, the classroom, and it's just sort of like a visual language way of saying, like, here's a very standardized way. And then this was not intentional, but I wanted one of those corny Reed posters, and I picked Bill Cosby as a celebrity, and then that became very loaded in which actually we just did a second edition of this. We added some stuff, and I changed Bill Cosby to someone else because it's just not what the point, we don't want to start talking about all that. So let's move on. So then after that, I didn't have a job anymore. I didn't know what to do. So I don't remember what happened, but I think a lot of teaching stuff. And then started doing comics on the web. This was, I think, the first web comic I did. I was working with this war correspondent guy. He got blown up in a military vehicle. Made a comic about it. I had a kind of a cool time drawing this. I don't like to draw guns and military stuff, though, but it was always interesting. And he's an example of someone I didn't work super well with, though. Like, this is like a very, I'd say, what does your apartment look like? I had to draw his apartment. He said, I don't care. And so I don't want to work with, I'm drawing your apartment, What is it full of, I don't know, what do you want me to draw in there? But I got interested in the web as a outlet for getting your stuff out there, because then anyone can have it. They don't have to give you $4 or whatever. So then this was a big moment. Also, getting into my 30s, like in your 20s, people get pregnant and you go, what are you going to do? Is this okay? And then you get in your 30s and then people are trying to get pregnant. And then you ask your friends, they get married, are you guys going to have kids? And then that can be a really loaded question. And two of my friends who were recently married, really close together in time, like the same summer, I think, had miscarriages and talked really openly with me about it. And they said, they both said the exact same thing, which was that they didn't know how common it was until it happened to them, and that there was no like cultural guidance of like, how do I deal? Can I tell my coworkers and everyone gives me a break, or can I take a few days off work, or like, how do I kind of get treated well around this? And we don't have that. In the US, we don't have it. In some other cultures we do, but definitely not here. So that felt important to me. And so, I don't know, to me always, like, if you go, oh, there should be resources for this, or there should be a thing, like, if it doesn't exist, then you should make it. And so I interviewed 4 women. One of them was one of those friends, and the other one declined to do it, but told me she wanted me to do it. And so then just trying to find a range of different folks, in this case they're all women, who'd had miscarriages, and just sitting and listening to their story. And this was for a site called The Nib, which is no longer with us. But and it's really about like looking at them and seeing them and hearing their story, giving them a chance to share it, and also from my seat, sort of modeling just listening. Like, obviously a question of authorship comes up right away, I think, when I tell you I made this, is like, why did you make that? And should men be talking about miscarriage? And I think those are very valid questions, and I think the whole kind of what makes me an artist or whatever is that I think about these things a lot. And that also I didn't say one word in this, I think is really important. Like, I think if I was like, hey, ladies, miscarriage is important, and I'm going to tell you that's gross, right? I don't want to do that. But modeling, sitting and listening and creating a space to listen, and in a broader sense, it's about grief, I think, too, which is, I could talk more about what that was about for me. But and these are important things we should all know about. We should all know about this. And then that it was a free resource on the web was really important. This is still on the web, and it still gets shared a lot. And people share this with their friends when they have miscarriages, or they find it when they are looking for resources. And that to me is really important, and something I don't want to say glad I made, because it's messier than that, but yeah, you get what I'm saying. So then that was a one-off thing to me. I wasn't like really feeling like it was my place to make a bunch of stuff like that, but Dr. Jessica Zucker in LA is a clinical psychologist. She had started a hashtag I had a miscarriage. She had been very vocal about miscarriage online, and she saw what I did. And I don't know what you'd say. She sort of recruited me, I guess you would say. And I'm not gonna not work with like a really smart expert who wants to work with me. And again, it was very much like, I know how to do this thing. I know how to make the pictures and make the visual narrative, and I'm just gonna listen and do what she tells me, you know? But also, we got into that mode of like really good open discussions and side conversations and learning about each other and bringing it back. So we ended up doing this whole run of stuff. And the first one was, I think, for BuzzFeed, and it's about postpartum depression and anxiety. So it's these profiles of these different women and color-coded to describe different feelings. And as a person who's been partnered with someone who's had kids too, I'm very glad I have this information, because it's pretty crucial to know. And again, I'm happy I got to share this. This is just the draft I wanted to show you. I don't know what kind of work y'all do, but one thing that's very true too is if you're working with people who don't make comics and don't work in comics, you really have to like show them what you're gonna do. You can't go, oh, and then the third panel will be like a zoom out, and then they have their brain isn't conjuring the same images as yours, you know, you have to really show them. And then as we continued to work together, we didn't have to do that anymore, but it's really important to draft that out for clients who are not visual people. And so then we just had a whole string of stuff we did. Both these are for the New York Times, which was a big honor for both of us. And what about that? I also was just like, oh, I'll try this thing out with ink washes and digital stencils, and oh, I'll try this, you know, it was sort of like visual experimenting too, as she was really in the driver's seat, Jessica Zucker, you know, she would have an idea or a thing she wanted to do, and then I would just try to find ways to contribute. But that thing too of like public health or like messaging kind of carried through too. It feels really important to me. It feels like, you know, being an artist can be very selfish, I think, or self-indulgent, or sort of a tunnel vision kind of a thing. You looked at all your students like, yeah, I'm very selfish. We can talk about that sometime too. But this is like a way of contributing something, I feel like, you know. I did this one with Planned Parenthood, which was super cool. I love Planned Parenthood, you know. I've got my niece very on board for Planned Parenthood now. I'm very proud of that. UC San Diego had a dementia care partner thing they wanted to do. I did that. That was a fun one. The health department, the Multnomah County Health Department, I did instructions for at-home colorectal fecal screenings. That was a real joy to work on. It was a good correspondence too, like everyone had fun with it. I'd be like, I'm a little backed up today, but I managed to push this out, you know. And then anywhere in Multnomah County, this is the kind of artist I am, where like I've never been recognized, or people don't go, oh, you did that? Like if you go to any store that has tobacco or vape product, you know, go to any plaid pantry in Multnomah County, you'll see that sticker on the door. Like, I did that sticker. And then, okay, we're getting towards the end here, and we're running out of time. Am I doing okay? Okay. Just in general. Yeah? Okay, cool. I did a whole thing where Dave's Killer Bread sold as a company, and I got a payout, is the NDA version I can give you. And so I wasn't completely broke for the first time in my life. And like everything I did because I wanted to for the most part, but I never like invested in myself. I never said like, what do I want to do? And I'm going to just get this out and do it and not worry about if it's viable or whatever. And I always wanted to do a biography. I really like the idea of comics biographies. And I picked Muhammad Ali. And I actually wanted to do this right after the To Teach book, but I was like, I'm not good enough yet. I need time to work on it. And then I had this opportunity to kind of just like pursue what I wanted to pursue. And for me, initially, it was that he refused to fight in the Vietnam War, which I think is really important, and someone using their status as a public figure and as a celebrity to kind of take a stance on something. And then also that boxing works really well in comics. That, you know, like if you did a biography about a musician or something in comics, like music doesn't work in comics, but boxing works very well. And then I just went in with curiosity and I read a couple of books about Muhammad Ali and I was like very sold. And then there was a movie, a documentary called The Trials of Muhammad Ali that came out, I don't know, 10 plus years ago. That was really about the political elements of his life and career. That too. So I did something like 3 years of research before I even like drew anything. I read thousands and thousands of pages about Muhammad Ali. I'm actually like one of the living experts about Muhammad Ali now. And I went all in on this book, and it's too soon to say it didn't work out, but it didn't go well, I would say. So I broke it into 2 volumes, and I finished the first volume, and it's currently a self-published project. And if you guys want to talk more about this, we'll do a Q&A, or if you want to talk about authorship and stuff about that, I have a lot to say. But I'm glad I did this for me, for my own creative purposes. But as a professional ambition, it didn't go well. I don't really want to talk about that. Couple last things, and then I'll wrap it up. The transportation department, in collaboration with PSU, had me sort of consult or edit, I guess, on a project. And it was the same thing. It was taking research and adapting it to comics. This is the Spanish language edition, but it's in English too. And that was cool because I didn't even have to draw it. It was like so much easier to not have to draw it. So much less work. And it usually like pays better to not be the person who draws it, which is, I don't know what to do with that information, but it's true. And then more recently, I've been doing environmental justice work with Dr. Leslie King I met on the circuit. She's like a scientist, and she was a surgeon, a rural surgeon. I always have trouble saying those words. Rural surgeon. Say it 3 times fast. Anyway, she was writing a bunch of essays and stuff about environmental justice, you know, like why do all the black folks live in North Portland with the worst heat dome and pollution density, you know, and like who designed that? It was totally done on purpose by people who are running the city. And let's talk about that. This one was very much about, well, we pitched it and they approved it. It was very much about the history of Asian farmers in Oregon, and they actually backed out pretty far into it and decided that they were not comfortable with us telling that story, which says a lot also, I would say, because that's a really rough history. So she and I have done a few projects, and we always kind of have varying degrees of success in terms of like getting to say what we want to say. But a lot of times it's like promoting a project, or we just did a whole thing about the, I can't remember the name of the dam. There's like an overpass with the dam under it that's going to collapse, and they need people to agree to get it funded before it collapses, and no one wants to pay for it, but no one wants it to collapse either. So we'll do things like that. We'll make like a comic about it to try. All this stuff is like, hey, all this research has been done and no one will read it or engage with it. So maybe if it's a comic book, we can get someone to engage with it. And then finally, last thing, more recently, this is really out of left field, but I worked with, for the first time I did like a traditional comic book. So like when people do, oh, you're a comic book artist? What kind of stuff do you make? This is like the first thing I've done where it's sort of like what people imagine maybe you make when they hear that, you know, because I'm like, oh, I do nonfiction and I do research, adapting research. So this was an author, comics author, his name is Mark Russell. He's won a bunch of awards and stuff, but he had this idea for like a Twilight Zone type thing. So we did a series called Vanishing Point. It's 6 issues. I drew half of them, and each issue is like its own little Twilight Zone-y type story. There's a twist, and it's got a sci-fi theme. And it was fun. I don't know. It was like, I don't know how to talk about it in this span of time, but like, the responsibility I've sort of tried to take on in the work I've done has been really meaningful to me. And then there's been a lot of challenges that have come up, or bureaucratic challenges, or I think bullshit is the best word I can think of. And so this was kind of a break. Also, every time I work with an expert or like a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, they don't know how to make comics, and it's so much work to translate their smart ideas into comics. And this guy just wrote a script and I drew it and it worked. And it was like this many panels and this is the text and you draw it and it works. And it was like a nice break. So I don't know. It's too soon to say. This just came out. Things are a little up in the air. I'm doing one more comic with him that I'm finishing hopefully soon. And then I got to figure out what's next after that, because it's a never-ending hustle. That's the other thing. So that gets you up to speed. That's like a good percentage of the stuff I made. Thank you for hearing all that. And does anyone have any questions? Thank you. People always don't want to be the first person to ask questions, but you give these talks and you're always like so worried no one will ask a question. Yes?
I was going to just look it up, but I might as well ask.
Yeah?
How was halftones originally done traditionally?
Halftones? Yeah. So they used to be like a big sticker, and it was a Japanese, like manga uses them all the time, right? And you would have to order them from Japan. And there would be like $4 for a sheet this big, and you would stick it on, and then you'd cut it out with a razor. And you'd like keep your scraps because it was so expensive. So you go, okay, that's about big enough for that desk, this little scrap I have. You stick them on. And then now you can just do them digital, which is much cheaper and quicker too, because it's a very cumbersome process to stick them on there. Yeah? Yes? Like for process? I should have talked more about that actually, because I switched it up a little bit. I like to ink on paper with a brush, and I'm very set in my ways. I actually hand letter too, which I'm like the last person on earth who hand letters, but I just think
these guys had to do a hand lettering project.
Yes. Yes, you thank that teacher.
Sure.
And they loved it. Yeah, you rule it out. And but like these, I think the last handful of things I did are generally, I did the pencils in Procreate, and then I printed them on Bristol. You turn them blue, and you light blue, and you print them on Bristol, and then I hand letter or ink them. Although on the thing I'm working on right now, I really realized the scale of it I really don't like. I don't like, you know what I mean? You're drawing all these fingers and then you see it and you're like, oh, I can't even see that. It took me 20 minutes. So now what I'm doing, I'm trying to do the roughs really small and then blowing them up and printing those out on crappy paper, and then doing the pencils with a pencil and just getting that feel of moving your arm and knowing the scale of the page. And then I scan that and I put that into Procreate, and then I'll do the backgrounds and stuff and scoot stuff around. When I was drawing to teach, there were so many times I'd be like, I got the drawing right, but it's 3 inches over, and I would trace it and then erase it and then put the tracing on a light table and then trace it back. It was horrible. So getting to scoot stuff around and flip it and look at it and stuff. But I'm doing an ever evolving mix of those things. Or even the nano clouds at the top, that's digital, because I can't figure out how to do that. It's digital charcoal or whatever, and I couldn't get it on the paper the way I wanted. So, and color, usually it's digital. But so it's a mix of those things. And I see a hand. Yeah. What's the resolution of your files?
That's a good question.
Because that sounds like a resolution issue to me.
Yeah, probably. Because when I select something Procreate and make it bigger, it gets like fuzzy because it was like the pixels get like
Yeah.
weird. So I guess like
Well, make sure it's 300 dpi is a big one because that's print quality. Anything below that will not print well. And then and then when you blow stuff up, I don't know too because I do it just to ink on paper. So even the backgrounds I ink by hand. I just kind of pencil. Like that perspective is always hard, and so I use the perspective grids, But like a lot of times the pencils I print are pretty rough looking, So you might just Google. But my guess is that you're using too low a resolution. That's my informed guess. Yes, in the back.
My question is, do you have any advice for like working with people who are not as familiar with the process of making comics and kind of communicating with them? Because that's very interesting and useful to know.
Yeah, I mean, that's been and I almost feel like, I'm an artist or whatever, but so much of what has made this career, if you can call it that, work is kind of being able to do that, and being interested in those. I think, well, one, I'll tell you real quick, there's a lot of stuff I didn't show you, including one time I had to get like lawyered up against someone who sucked the whole time, and then it got really nasty at the end. And then the lawyer said, "This guy is a jerk. Did you know he was a jerk?" And I was like, "Yeah, I knew he was a jerk." And he was kind of like, "Well, that's how we got where we are, So like, pay attention to red flags, And you got to make decisions like, is this just a job? Am I getting paid and I'll get out of here and move on with my life? Is it worth it? Having to evaluate if it's worth it. So, but ideally it is. And then, I don't know, my buddy was in nursing school and he told me I said this thing to him that he remembered, which was an honor to me. But like around when To Teach came out, I was like going and doing talks a lot. And I always would have like my little portfolio. And I always would get stressed out going into the airport because you put it on the conveyor and you're supposed to put it like this way, not this way. And I could never remember. And if they ever got mad at me, "You're supposed to turn it." I always would say, "I don't work at the airport." I can't remember because you're doing this one thing all day. But it's true for this too. Like how I draw it out for people, they don't know how to make a comic. Why should they know how to make a comic? Or if they did, then you're out of luck, So trying to be, that mutual curiosity is what you're really hoping for, that I'm interested in what you have to share with me and you're interested in what I have to share with you. So if you can get that kind of relationship going, then it should go, and it's just like mutual respect and being curious about each other, And then the constraints are always good, like 30 words a panel is a really good constraint for comics. No more than 30 words a panel. Everyone always writes way too much when the first time they write comics, Or, I remember I did a cover for the Willamette Week, and I was working with these like Pulitzer Prize winning journalists, and they were like struggling through the script, and it was so bad, and I was like, just don't try to write a comic anymore. Just write the information out, and then Marvel style? Do you guys know Marvel style? I'll just assume a few people don't know, but, Stan Lee used to go like, in the new issue of Spider-Man, Spider-Man fights Electro, and Aunt May is going to get evicted, so Peter has to figure out how to get some money. And then Steve Ditko would just draw that. And he would take it back to Stan Lee, and then Stan Lee would write the words in, allegedly. But, and that's Marvel style. It's basically like the illustrator visually tells the story, and then the writer puts the words in. And that's a pretty good way to do it if people don't know how to write a comic, is just kind of lay it out for them and then go, okay, now fill in the blanks. And and then it's just it comes case by case after that too. It's like a personality thing, but pay attention to that because it doesn't usually get easier if it's, it's like any relationship, I would say. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah, I think I saw someone's hand before too, maybe. Yes?
How are you able to find all of your different employers? What spaces are you going into where you're able to reach out to them or they're able to reach out to you?
Totally. That's the question, right? Like, I have a friend who's an illustrator, and every once in a while I'll see her stuff on something. I go, "How did you get that?" And then whenever I get something, she goes, "How did you get that?" And like people kind of don't know almost. because like 2023 was a really, really bad year for me professionally and for everyone, I think. And that was the year I like went on LinkedIn and applied for stuff, and I got 0 things I ever applied for. So it seems like active pursuit isn't really a good, I mean, so you keep making stuff and putting it out is like the simplest thing. And then you have to decide, like, do I want a stable, I mean, I did a lot of teaching in this time too, and that was like the stable income when it was stable. But yeah, I don't know. It's like you go down these threads, you know, like Jessica Zucker found me, and then we just kept pitching stuff. So sometimes I get hooked up with someone who finds stuff. I now have like a handful of people I've collaborated with who want to make. Also, comics on the web have really died, which I didn't see. Jessica Zucker and I used to send a proposal out, and like, you know, an hour later we'd have a gig. And then the last one we did was like, wasn't like that anymore, because the internet's not paying for content anymore. You know, they can just like look at a TikTok video that someone made for free or whatever. So it's like constantly shifting landscape. And so staying on top of that in whatever way you can is big. And then figuring out like, what can you do? Like for me, like I can do this, but there's a million people better than me and faster than me at this. This is something I stumbled into, but that thing of collaborating with researchers and experts and adapting, that's like something I know how to do. There's probably 20 people like that in the country who can do that well, you know? So that's a niche, and it wasn't something I like knew about myself until I learned how to do it, you know? And then we're all like these brands now, I guess, you know? So like, I guess some people use Instagram and get stuff. I don't know how to do that, but so I don't know is like the worst answer, but it's also the truest answer of like, I wish I could just say like, oh, you go down to give me this address and you go there at 9 p.m. on a Thursday and they'll hire you, but it's not like that. I don't know. But so figure out who are you and what's your voice and what are you contributing, and then put it out and you'll hopefully find places for it. I don't know. Yeah. What's up?
Did you say you have a talk coming up at Northwest Mocha?
Yeah, the Comics Museum on Sunday. It's going to be a lot of this and then a little bit of different stuff too. But yeah, they have like their first exhibit of aging cartoonists from the area, and I am one of them. So yeah, I'll see every one of you there on Sunday. I'll really look forward to it. You should all go. Did you have another question, or I guess we're wrapping?
Like maybe on Instagram account, just like uploading everything, or following other people who are comic artists. So like maybe you'll see your own like stuff, and then you can like DM and like talk, I guess.
I think building relationships is definitely, and that can look different. I'm not good at the virtual space, but also like it's weird. I mean, like I ran into Kendra, and now here I am. You know, like these things just. I haven't been out in the world. My then girlfriend, now my wife, was pregnant going into the pandemic, and now I'm a married guy with kids, and I got 2 kids, and this is like the longest I've been out of my house in 5 years. So I'm really missing out on that, you know. But yeah, like I went to the graphic medicine meetup just to go, and I got a bunch of work out of that from Kaiser. And then fake it. If anyone ever says like, can you do this, and you're not sure how to do it, just do it. Because someone who is probably more undeserving than you will do it if you don't do it. So just do it. That's, I'd say, if there's anything I can say, that imposter thing, like I said, just don't listen to that part of yourself, you know? Like if there's an opportunity, I mean, if you absolutely can't do it, then don't do it. But if you're gonna have to like teach yourself how to do it while you're doing it, that's just how it goes. Like then just do it. Just thrust yourself into that. When I did the teach book, I did not know how to do that. And by the time it was done, I totally knew how to do it. And those are your real periods of growth, is when you force yourself into like a high pressure situation where you have to like get it done and do it well. So That's if there's like one takeaway from this it is maybe that. Yeah. All right. Do we have any more questions? Or we wrap it up, or I'll talk forever. Maybe you're gonna have to escort me out of here. All right. Thank you.